Welcome to Rule Breaker, Style Maker, a podcast breaking down the so-called fashion rules that we hold and that hold us back in our life and our style. Through conversations with industry guests and the Australian Style Institute team, we explore how breaking a rule can change your life. I'm your host, Lauren Di Bartolo. Let's get into today's episode. We would like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we record today, and pay our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past, present and emerging. Welcome back. Today's episode is an interview with Jacqui Challinor. Jacqui is an executive chef of hatted restaurant NOMAD, and she has a really impressive career story to tell. But it's in the conversation we have today that real inspiration, at least for me, is found in what Jacqui has overcome and achieved in her life more broadly. I should let you know Jacqui is a friend, and we met a few years ago, and never have we had a conversation like the one you're about to hear today. We talk about addiction, success, and what it's like to be a female in spaces that aren't always safe for us to be in. There are some really key themes here that I know will resonate, from leadership to becoming the best versions of ourselves and the real payoff when we take a chance and do the thing that is out of our comfort zone. I trust you enjoyed today's episode, and I can't wait to hear what you think. A quick disclaimer before we get into today's episode that there are themes of sexual assault and alcohol addiction. So today's conversation is an exciting one for me because when we meet people in our younger years, we get to know them in the context of, I guess, being young, finding our way in the world and working hard for the things that we want. But we see the progression of someone's life and career. Meeting people as an adult is a whole different story. And you and I found ourselves at the same dinner party, which truly, it's my cousin and her partner and your friends have a knack of pairing interesting people at dinner parties. What they didn't realise that night is I gained a friend over a good home-cooked meal and a pandemic. I remember I was stuck interstate. And but I found out about you through you as this person that's already kind of done a lot of the hard yards. And I get to work with women and see what they are able to achieve, often in unlikely areas. Or when I say unlikely areas, it's more that they've kind of pushed the boundaries, broken the rules, you could say, in areas that it hasn't always been an easy path. I mean, even in the fashion design world, even today, the biggest designers are still men. The creative directors of fashion houses of women's wear are still men in most cases, not all. So I think it's a really interesting time to be a woman, a professional, and and so this is really indulgent for me because I get to have the conversation that we don't have when we're catching up, over a Sunday night dinner or
the gossip and all the other stuff.
Exactly.
The life things to catch up on.
The life things to catch up on, yeah. You said that it's been a big month.
Yeah.
What has made this month so big?
I'm going to say 2 months, really. Restaurant openings. Restaurant openings that didn't go particularly well or as to plan, that saw me thrown back into the kitchen away from, my role as exec chef of the group is more of a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 gig, which I had gotten really accustomed to. And then that stopped really quickly because at the end of the day, there was kind of no one to fall back on when we did have the head chef that we hired leave. Not great circumstances, and it absolutely was for the best. But it was just, you have to step in as the boss. There's no one else to get in there and do it. Like you can't direct that to your team, and you've got a brand new restaurant opening that's been hyped up in the media for the past 2 years pretty much. So it was just straight back into the firing line in that sense. And it had been a long time since I have done that. So it was a bit of a shock for me in terms of the HR stuff predominantly. I'm a jerk when it comes to people. Like I'm a good chef. I'm a good leader. I know I'm good at that, but it's more the dynamic in staffing these days is so different to what it was when I was a baby chef, and it's a lot more to manage now compared to what it was before. And it's great in the sense that it's changed and it's a much more inclusive, welcoming, less aggressive, angry environment, but there's a lot to manage, and especially coming into a team that I didn't hire myself, that was all kind of handed over. It was a lot to take in. I had to rewrite a menu in 2 days, launch it in 3. I worked for 6 weeks straight without a day off. Like 7 a.m. starts and then home at 1 and then admin for hours just to get on top. So, and all that, not living out of home, is not easy dealing with stress when you're not in your own space. So yeah, that's been my 6 weeks. But it's settled down. I've had some time off, been able to come back home obviously. Yeah. And we've hired a new head chef who is someone who I think is a really great fit for the company. His food is very delicious, and for me to be able to walk away this early on in the piece from him being hired says a lot about, I think, my trust in him and his palate and his management style and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very optimistic that things are on the up and I can go back to my office chef life.
Cool. Office chef life. This is something, I'm going to be honest, you've kind of schooled me in because there can be misconceptions in any industry. I know as a stylist, people think personal stylist, we're doing the shopping all the time, we're in people's wardrobes, when a really large component is actually research and pre-shops. And in the editorial space, we think being on photo shoots when a large part of what we're doing is historical references and sourcing garments and then returning them. So a lot of what we do isn't actually the part that people see always. And you've taught me a lot about that it is, from menu writing, and it's the business of, which is so different to what I thought. For someone who doesn't know your resume or experience and how you've arrived at where you are now, could you give us an insight into who Jacqui Challinor is? Tell us the story.
Well, Chef Me started when I was, how old was I? 20, I believe it was. It took a little while to get into it because I was scared of getting into the boys' club. I really, from what I'd heard, it was just not an environment that women got into, and I was quite intimidated by the idea of doing it. I always wanted to get into food styling and photography. That was always the dream, or nutrition, but I didn't want to go to uni, so I was a lazy chef. And a teacher at school said that I should go and do a course at TAFE that a friend of hers had worked at Women's Weekly did, and that was a good foot in the door to kind of feel around all the areas. They had a bit of nutrition, a bit of practical work, all that sort of stuff. And I did it, and I found that the day I loved the most was the day in the kitchen and practical, and from there it just kind of snowballed, and applied for jobs. I got the first job that I applied for, which was at a cafe in Roselle, and to be honest, like so many young chefs these days go and aim for the 3-hat kitchens and all that sort of stuff, but they don't necessarily get a lot of really great hands-on experience in a space like that. They'll end up picking herbs or just doing like really menial tasks. I got thrown into a short order kitchen with a head chef who resigned 3 months later, and they didn't replace her. So it was just me as a baby little first year apprentice chef. And it was the greatest launch pad that I could have possibly had, because it taught me about efficiency. It taught me about self-reliance. It taught me about working with purpose. And because I didn't have anybody else there, I learned how to run a little pass, albeit a small one. And I was just cooking, bacon and eggs and stuff. But I learned real skill in that being my start versus what, those people who are concerned about image and where they work and what their resume looks like. That never entered into my mind. I didn't have a concept of that. So I'm really grateful that was my start. And then from there, I went to Maryvale and I finished my apprenticeship there. I worked at a restaurant called Mad Cow for 3.5 years, and that set me up. That's my fondest kitchen memory. That kitchen was like family. my head chef at the time was phenomenal and, you know, still a really dear friend of mine to this day. That was an example of how a kitchen should be run. He was cool and calm and collected. He never raised his voice. He never disrespected anyone. And it was just like this guy. You knew when you screwed something up because he was just a look that he gave you, and you was like, okay, I'll go back and try that again.
The power of a simple look,
right?
but
how good is that? And then I moved on from there. I went to Felix, which was another restaurant in the Maryvale wheelhouse, and I was there for a bit. And that was probably my first experience in real, like, hardcore kitchen in terms of working doubles every day, 6 days straight. Like, just
what does that mean for someone who doesn't know?
8 till midnight, no breaks, no nothing. It's just, you don't eat. That's when they say bad things about hospitality, that was everything about what was bad about it. You know, like, you didn't stop, you just worked. It was like, I get up, I go to work, I come back, and I don't stop. And then on top of that, we were 25-year-old idiots who were working at the time at the hottest new opening in Sydney. So we had half-price drinks at all Maryvale venues. So we would just work and then party and then work and then party. And it was fun at the time. Probably not doing ourselves any favours. But it was fun. And, you know, at that age and that time in our careers, it was, you know, the place to be. And then from there, I moved on to a Greek restaurant called Xanthi, and that was where I progressed into my first head chef role. So I started as a chef de partie, which is kind of like a mid-level management role. And because I'm a bit of a control freak and I don't like disorganization, I'd kind of go in there and start ripping things apart and cleaning the cool room and doing all that sort of stuff. So that's, I think, when I started asserting a bit of management, and, you know, the people around saw that, and I got promoted to sous chef, and then I got promoted to head chef. So that was my first big management role, and working really closely with Dave, who was the exec chef and owner of the restaurant, in terms of menu creation and stuff, because I had no idea what I was doing. But we got a chef's hat there, which was pretty bloody exciting. And then I was there for 1.5 years and decided I hated hospitality. I was sick of the hours and sacrificing everything. I didn't see my family. I didn't see my friends. You know, you just worked all the time. People had parties and you just never went because it's a Saturday night, I have to work. Like, it was never okay to ask for a night off or a day off or anything like that. It was just a taboo thing. You're sick, you work. You just don't take time as a chef. You don't have a personal life. You are just a chef and that's it. And I was sick of it. I didn't want to do it anymore. So I took a job in corporate catering that was Monday to Friday, 7 to 5. And I did it for 4 months and I hated it. It had no soul. There was no camaraderie. There was no service, which is the fun part, right? Like, you work for 4 hours in the morning prepping and then you get to service, and that's the bit that you get the adrenaline pumping, and there's nothing quite like that feeling of that going really well.
You hear performers say that all the time. Like, you do rehearsal, but once you've got an audience there, it's different. Different energy, different feeling. It's when it's showtime.
It's a really, when it all goes well. I mean, a lot of the times it doesn't. It's a horrible thing, but when it does go really well, it's like this adrenaline rush that, you know, I think chefs are crazy. There's something not right in our brains. There's a reason why we do it, and that's probably it. And so that was when NOMAD came up. Nathan, who was the head chef soon to be head chef of NOMAD at the time, I'd worked with at Felix, and he reached out and told me about the concept, which I loved the idea of. I went to have a look at the space and just was like, this place is amazing. I love the idea of learning all this stuff, and what a dream. So I took the job there, and he took off after about 1 year. And in conversation with the owners, I'd mentioned that I had been a head chef of another restaurant, and they asked if I wanted to put my hand up. And at the time I was like, good God, no, absolutely not. I'm 25. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to run a 200-seat restaurant. And that's that automatic female thing where you constantly question yourself and you never back yourself, and imposter syndrome and all of that. And it was my dad who said to me, how do you know you can't do it? I was like, I just know I can't do it. And he was like, yeah, but you don't know unless you try. So just try. And if you fail, fine, but at least you know. And so I put my hand up and I had to interview. I had to cook for the owners. I actually had to cook against my head chef from Felix. He was leaving and he'd applied for the role at Nomad. So that was daunting.
Yeah.
But I beat him. So, so they offered me the job and the rest is kind of history, really. It's been 10 years this year, September we opened, which is completely wild to think about. Like, I don't know what happened in the last 10 years. I don't know where they went. I feel like that seems like such a lifetime ago. It's like, I don't know what happened, but then when you think about it, so much has also happened in that amount of time. It's just
And Nomad
crazy.
Sydney has gone from one restaurant, obviously, to now Nomad Melbourne also. And
now Beau, which is our second in Sydney, also in Surrey Hills, and soon to be our fourth down here, which is called Renan LaRue. So we've got the old stock exchange site on the corner of Queen and Collins Street in the CBD, and it is, I just actually saw the old photos, the ANZ Bank, because it's behind there, shared with us, and there is so much history in this building. Like, it is gorgeous. It's a bit of an honour, I guess, for us to now take carriage of it and try and turn it into something phenomenal, because I think, you know, so many people that I talk about this venue to, they're like, oh my God, how exciting is that? I know that building. I love that building.
A very iconic piece of Melbourne, an old piece of Melbourne real estate.
All heritage complete. Like, it's been, I mean, on our back end of things, that's been a really difficult thing because there's so many things that you can touch, you can't. And obviously we want to honour the bones of the building and represent the interiors as it is. So it's like Beck, one of the co-owners of Nomad, is incredible in that. Like, she's an architect by trade, so her eye for detail and the vision for the project it's just going to be insane. I'm so excited to see it. Daunting, but excited.
Speaking of daunting, I just had a moment as you were speaking before where you said that you headed up a Greek restaurant. You had never told me that. For anyone listening, on Sunday night, I made Jacqui, we called it Greek-ish. I'm not Greek, but gave it a good crack. Now I'm really reflecting on my decision.
I have been dreaming about that salad. That was so good.
The marula salata.
Yeah, it was so good.
Thank you, TikTok, for that.
Yeah, really good, really good.
So you mentioned a boys' club or a perceived boys' club before you got into that. Where was your first experience of that, and how did you navigate it?
The first job that I had was a total boys' club, but it was a fun boys' club. Okay. Like, it was just the laughs and the jokes, and I loved that environment. I've always had a messed up sense of humor, and, you know, like, I've never been a girly girl, and that was a fun space to be in. The first negative experience I had was at Mad Cow. We had a sous chef there who was just an outright pig. He'd make comments about me not wearing makeup to work, or, you know, I forgot my chef pants one day, so I just was wearing my jeans and I was upstanding cleaning the extraction hoods, and, you know, he'd come up and he'd touch my ass and, you know, oh, your jeans look really good today, like, you should forget your pants more often. Bearing in mind I was 21 at the time, so a child. And that was the first time that I felt like I was an imposter in this different world. That progressed quite badly to the point where he actually grabbed me, like, complete grab of the vagina, and then looked at me and says, yeah, I grabbed your pussy, what are you going to do about it?
Wow.
Which, as a kid, really, I didn't know what to do about it. I was just like, I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to do. I went back to work the next day. He'd been moved to a different kitchen by this point, so it wasn't my normal little place of work, and I was saving up for my little backpacker trip around Europe, so that was why I'd asked for the additional shifts. And I said to my head chef, is there a different kitchen I can work in? And he was like, why? He knew instantly that there was something up, and I was like, I just don't want to go back to that one. Surely out of this whole company there's another kitchen I can work in. And he was like, I'm not letting this go. Tell me what happened. And I think Chris is a really intuitive guy. He's, he gets it. And I think there was me as an apprentice probably didn't realize the reasons why he was no longer in our kitchen. Maybe he was moved along for, so I think Chris might have clocked the behavior definitely prior to this happening. So I think me saying that was a bit of a red flag, and that's why he pushed the matter. Anyway, I told him, not because I wanted to, but because he wasn't going to let it go. And I begged him not to say anything. And he was just like, I can't not. Like, that's sexual assault in the workplace. Like, outright, not just a sly little slap on the ass. That's a lot. And I didn't realize it at the time. And I guess I'm only really starting to think about it now because it's come up a couple of times within the media in the last, month, I guess. Gourmet Traveller did a piece. Good Food did a piece. There's been a lot of it around the industry at the moment. There was a piece in another magazine that there was a review about a female server's outfit and how she was basically exposing herself. And the reviewer decided to use that as the opening line of the article, which was just like, what relevance does that have to the food quality or the quality of the service or anything like that? So it's been a really hot topic in the media at the moment. I guess this has probably contributed to the last month I've had because that's, 2 major hospitality publications have gone live with that story. And I figured it was time to talk about it because I danced around it over the years, but I'd never really blatantly just been like, this is exactly what happened to me. This is the wording. This is the physicality of what I actually went through. And it wasn't okay. So that ended up with me in an interview room with a boardroom full of senior males as a 21-year-old female with no support, no offer of support. And it ended up as a he said, she said, he denied it, and it went nowhere else after that. So
really?
Yeah. But beyond that, I've had a really... It's so ridiculous to say I've had a really lucky escape for the rest of it because you shouldn't have to deal with stuff like that. No. But it's quite scary that from me going public with that story this month, the amount of women who have reached out to me on social media and all this stuff about their experiences within the hospitality industry and greater, it happens across all industries, but scary and sad and insane to think that is... people think that they can do things like that, right? At what level do you think it's appropriate to grab a female child? 21, it's a baby. You're a baby, right? You don't...
And you're not in a position of authority at that time in that kitchen.
Yeah.
To end up in that circumstance of he said, she said, seems so completely outrageous and that nothing was done. Do you believe it would play out differently now if...
I think so. I think definitely. I think there's too much awareness and too many platforms now for people to really make some noise, which is great. The company is a big one and they've been in hot water for other issues and things like that. And, I've been pretty mindful about not naming them and I don't know why, but I'd like to hope that they've heard everything that I've said in the last month and are going to, really think about and reevaluate how that went down and maybe their practices moving forward. It was so long ago now. I don't need anything from it. I just guess that it's important to talk about it and to make people aware that this stuff happens. It's happened to me recently. It's crazy that it still goes on.
For context, the Merivale Group, for anyone who doesn't know, is one of Australia's largest hospitality groups, primarily in New South Wales, pubs and restaurants, etc. You just said that it hadn't happened for some time until recently, which in a recent conversation floored me because I see you as someone who is strong, established, commands respect, isn't afraid to tell people what you think and how things should be. And despite all of this, recently something happened.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you want to share about that and how relevant it is or not, but after earning all these stripes and becoming just a an older, stronger person, human, you still faced this.
Yeah. I guess without naming names, it's pretty obvious to anyone in the industry that they would understand who I'm referring to. And I don't know why I have chosen to protect it to this point, maybe because of his greater circle and my respect for that part of his life. But yeah, I was in a situation that I never thought that I would realistically be in again in my own workspace. Like I've never ever felt like that in my workplace ever. Like not within Nomad Group. Like everyone is, we yell and scream at each other sometimes. That's hospitality. We have those moments, but it's never really been personal, and I've never felt so uncomfortable or disrespected or out of control. I'm a pretty hard nut. Like it takes a lot to crack me and to break me down, and it happened really dramatically within the scope of like 3 weeks, to the point where I was like in tears in the office, and I'm so not a crier. I don't cry. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to approach it. And the fixer in me was just like, let's just get this restaurant open. Let's get it open. And I'll deal with it after. Like, I'm not going to let it slide. How could I let this slide? I wouldn't let this happen to my young chefs. Mm-hmm. Why would I let it happen to me? But I just kept thinking, it's fine. I can handle it. Until I couldn't anymore. And the behavior had me so uncomfortable that I didn't know what to do with it anymore. And I didn't think it was fair for me to absorb it any longer. And the powers that be knew, and they were ready to jump on it. But I was the one that kept pushing back and saying, no, I'll deal with it. Let's just get everything sorted. But, like, inappropriate touching, and there was a few outwardly obvious ones, but it was more the the little rub of the small of the back and the upper thigh, and the comments of like, why are you rejecting my advances, and if I was single we'd be making out right now. And it always seemed to happen when I had to slip into my role as exec
the leader,
chef.
the authority, the final say.
Yeah. And every time I had to assert that, this behaviour came on top. And it was entirely a control move, entirely. And from someone that I've known for a really long time and really thought that there was a really respectful dynamic there, as soon as push came to shove and we had to get into the business end of things, it changed, and I saw an entirely different person than the person that I've known for the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So it was a shock as well. Like I thought that I had a friend in this person, and I didn't. And the perception of this person that I had was entirely wrong. And so it was more, there was like a personal hurt there. I felt like I'd been betrayed by a friend. And it wasn't a nice thing to do, especially in a dynamic and an environment where I'm the boss, I'm the leader. Like this is what I do. Like my teams, I work so well with them. There's respect between both of us going both ways. Like I work really well and collaboratively with my head chefs in both venues. And it just hadn't been something that I'd ever experienced. And it was a shock, and I'm processing it all now. I'm angry at myself for not standing up for myself. I'm angry at myself for I knew it wasn't okay, but why did I not say anything? Why did I think I could absorb it? Why did I push it to the side and let him think that it was okay? He did apologize to me, in all fairness, when he was confronted about it by the owner of the business. But his response was, I thought it was just us being friends. It was a joke to lighten the mood. I'm like, at what stage do you inappropriately touch a woman and make her feel uncomfortable like that and claim it's a joke? Especially when it's not reciprocated. Like if someone is standing there like a pencil with their arms by their side, and you've got someone on top of you in a lift with their face on your face, like that's not okay. Unless someone's hugging you back, or it's like, no, you've got to be able to read the room. And if someone's not engaging, don't do it. it just, yeah. So that obviously has contributed to the nightmare that has been the last 2 months of my life, like in the middle of restaurant openings, that, and trying to navigate that and the feelings that brought on. And, you know, it's not something that we have ever tolerated within the group. It's not something we ever will tolerate, but it was a bit of a shock to be put in that position again and see myself kind of regress back to that, oh no, I don't want to, like, I'll just push it aside and I won't deal with it. And isn't that just wild that we do that?
Yep. I'm so sorry to hear about that. I'm so sorry to hear that that's a situation that you were put in, but also one that now you're still questioning, and we shouldn't have to question ourselves. But you've said something that's key there, and I think is more of a universal thing that we're experiencing as women. You said his words were to lighten the mood. And there is something very uncomfortable, not just for men, but I think for all people, when a woman has to be in a position of leadership and demonstrate authority. And I've caught myself saying this over the years, like there's a graceful way to go about everything. Surely there's a graceful way to do it. But at what point do I truly believe that? Because I believe in kindness and I believe in caring for others, versus in a role there is a job to be done. And am I willing to get it done at the level it needs to be, at the standard I truly believe that it is, or will I compromise that to keep somebody else feeling comfortable, or what I might perceive as comfortable? Layer onto that what you've just described, and that's all kinds of wrong. The friendship, we do it. The friendship bit is a whole other element to that, which is just so much more deceitful and cruel.
Yeah. There's a lot of layers to that whole situation, and it's so true. Like, I think there's part of us that doesn't want to rock the boat, and we don't speak up about things. And like you said, how much am I willing to deal with because it's uncomfortable to address it to get the job done? And, you know, at the end of the day, like, we have a role, we have a responsibility, and we're in that job for a reason. And that's why you're good at what you do, right? Because you can be a leader and you can have uncomfortable conversations and you can do all of that sort of stuff. And there's a reason why you've progressed to a position that you're in. To then get to that point and question it again is a strange thing to happen.
How do you think you will process it? What do you think you will do? Because we are very good at brushing past that. I think it's actually, we fall within a age bracket as well, where it was like, just push harder, you might forget. Like you said, it is our job. You know, we wear this seriousness, I think, about the paths that we pursue. But if you're not doing that and you are addressing it, how will you do that?
I guess the last couple of weeks for me have been acknowledging that what happened wasn't okay, because I kept telling myself that it was fine and maybe it wasn't that bad. And it's interesting that the more people I tell about it, and you see the shocked faces and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened to you. And for so many weeks, I was like, oh, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I'm imagining it. It's just a little, it's a little back rub. It's not the end of the world.
Things we tell ourselves to make it okay.
I know. And, like I had dinner with my cousins the other week, and because I missed this big family thing, and, my sister had briefed them a little bit. So they were like, what has gone on? And I was telling them, and their faces were just dropping. And that was probably the first moment where I clicked and was like, oh, are you listening to the stuff that's coming out of your mouth right now? Because if one of my staff members came up and said that to me, I'd be like, it'd be instant dismissal, right? And so I think that for me is just acknowledging that what happened was a legitimate thing that made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. And giving that airtime, I guess, to just sit, because I think, from the incident that I told you about previously, I brushed it off and I just didn't think that it was an issue. I didn't recognize it as assault. And it's only been recent years that I've really thought about it and acknowledged what actually happened and how bad that was. And maybe that's because I am a manager now, and if that happened to one of my team, I'd be mortified. And I think when you start looking at it through those eyes, you give it the respect, I guess, that it actually needs. And if I have to exercise a duty of care over my teams now, would that fly with me if somebody came and spoke to me about it? And why should I be any different, right? At the end of the day, I'm still an employee of this company. I deserve the same level of, duty of care and all that sort of stuff. And what am I willing to accept for myself and what am I not? So there's lessons to be learnt in all of it. And that's mine. And that is, don't let yourself be in a situation that you're uncomfortable with and not speak up. Just don't ever again let somebody make you feel that way without speaking up. Because why? There's no, what are we afraid of saying? Please don't touch me like that. Or it shouldn't be an uncomfortable conversation. If you're in a position where you're uncomfortable or you don't like what someone's doing or you don't like what someone's saying, it could be in any situation. I find myself not speaking up, which is crazy. It's weird. I hate the word bitch, right? I think it's such a horrible word. I think it's such a horrible way to describe a female. It's just, you could call me any name under the sun, but that one in particular, I hate. And so many guys throw it around. Women throw it around. And I'm like, can we not? And for so long, I would just kind of let people say it. And it's only been the last couple of months where I've been like, do you know what? Don't say that word around me. Don't call me that word. Don't refer to other women using that word. Like, it's really incredibly derogatory and disrespectful, and just don't.
And are you calling it out that
I
way?
am
Is that
now.
how you...
I'm like, please don't use that word around me. I really don't like it.
Yep.
It offends me. Call me, just don't. And it's amazing, there's some people that are like, oh, but I say it to everybody. And I'm like, cool, say it to anybody that you like, just don't say it to me. And then there's other people that turn around and say, oh, cool, that's fine. I respect that. And I'm sorry that I upset you or I offended you and I won't do it again. But it's, it's those little things that you do for yourself that I'm kind of taking out of this whole situation. It's like, don't, why is it so hard to set boundaries and to bring things up that you're not comfortable with, however big or small it is? Yeah. So I guess that's my take from this, is just speak up.
It's amazing and it's so powerful. But the reason why I started this podcast, Rule Breaker Style Maker, is I think learning more about ourselves and what we will and won't tolerate, the rules that we will and won't break, and the new ones that we have to find, make our lives more intentional.
Yeah.
And what you've just said, even by educating the people around you about what does and doesn't work for you, what you will and won't tolerate, is in itself breaking a rule, because I think there's a nurturing part. I'm hearing it in what you're saying, which is you'll make sure the duty of care is there for everyone else.
Yeah.
But why do we even have to question that that's something that should apply to us? Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty incredible story, given that the success that you already have has not been a straightforward one by any stretch of the imagination, and no one's is, right? We all have ebbs and flows and peaks and troughs and challenges. There is something that you did, speaking of breaking rules, though, which was, I think, about 18 months ago, but you can correct me. You mentioned the culture that exists within your world of, chefs and the hours and then going out and, partying afterwards and drinking. You made a decision. How long ago was it to stop drinking?
It'll be 3 years in June.
3 years. Wow. Okay. And so I've only ever known you as well as someone who doesn't drink. What was the catalyst to make that decision?
It had been in my mind for a little while. I knew that I had a problem with drinking. I didn't drink every day, and I wasn't drinking out of brown paper bags on the street, but I had an unhealthy relationship with it. I would binge drink and black out every weekend, but it wasn't like I let it go for so long because it wasn't like I was going home after work and having a wine by myself or a bottle of wine. Like I didn't drink at home by myself ever, so I didn't think that I had a problem. When you look back in hindsight over the way that I was drinking, I was definitely doing it to avoid certain things in my life, and the relationship wasn't healthy. I didn't drink to enjoy it. I drank to get drunk, and I would keep going until I got to that point. I don't remember the last time I drank and didn't black out, and that was something that started playing in my mind. So it was probably, I would say 12 to 18 months prior to me actually making the decision that I started ticking over and thinking, this ain't good, what you're doing. It wasn't until, like, I would find myself in situations where people would invite me out and I really didn't want to go, but I would go anyway, or I might not even want to drink, but I would drink anyway because I was living up to this perception of Jacqui the party girl, and you know, Jackie's always fun, Jacqui always is up for, you know, going out and getting wasted every weekend. And for some ridiculous reason,
it's tough to live up to,
yeah,
by the way.
It
That's
like but like we were saying before, it's also tough to say no, I don't want to, or to stand up for something that isn't really making you feel great anymore. I just kept going along with it because that was who I was and what I did. I also didn't know of any other ways to deal with stress because that's how I'd always done it. And it all came to a head. COVID obviously happened. I got stood down along with the rest of the hospitality industry, and I was, well, how old was I? 34, and I didn't have a job. I had $3,000 in the bank. And as a 34-year-old, that was pretty dismal given I'd been working full time since I was 18 pretty much. And I just found myself in this position where I was like, oh my God, do I have to move back home with my parents who I love? But, you know, as a 34-year-old person, I didn't want to move back home. And, you know, my sister's there and she's like, I can cover the rent for a bit. And I'm like, what have you done with your life? So that was the first, I guess, big wake-up call where I was just thinking to myself, dude, come on, like, you're an adult. And I think for my entire life, I've just not behaved like an adult. I haven't acknowledged the fact that I am in adulthood, just didn't want to deal with it. And there's always this culture in hospitality. It's like, work hard, party hard, play hard. Like, I deserve to spend money on this $7,000 dress because I worked really hard and I haven't had a day off in 3 weeks. So why not, you know, or I'm going to go on a holiday every 6 months, and which I don't regret at all. Like that, all the travel that I've done is from all of my impulsivity and, you know, my lack of growing up. That's my most cherished memory out of all of that. And, but yeah, I really wanted, I wanted AirPods in lockdown, and there was a leather skirt that I really wanted. And I was like, you don't have a job? No, you're not going to buy that. Like, let's wait till you start working again. And so I didn't buy the things. And then when everything started opening back up again, I went out for dinner with some mates and we were on a rooftop and we were doing shots and having a great old time. And then we decided, because there was never we're just going to do that and then go home. It was like, where are we going next? And so we ended up out for dinner at another restaurant, and before I knew it, I was in the back of a cab screaming at a cab driver. I was FaceTiming my ex at the time who lived in New York, who didn't drink.
Never good. We've all been there and it's never good.
But he was a non-drinker. And I guess he was probably the first person that planted the seed in my
brain. Probably early morning with the time difference. Ouch.
With a non-drinker. And then you've got your wasted significant other in the back of a cab making a total fool of herself. And I remember waking up to a text from my sister being like, you've left the fridge open, because after 2 meals I came home and decided I needed another dinner. She's like, you've left the fridge open, seriously, like, grow up. I've had to chuck food out, it's been open all night. I'd
Same
woken
sister
up,
who was willing to cover the rent and go above and beyond. Which
and I was I was definitely disrespecting our relationship for a lot of years, because I know she was always having to look out for me and always worried about where I was and whether or not I was going to make it home alive. And I had a missed call from my boss because I tried to call him like the middle of the night, because there was a few little issues and things, and I just decided that probably I was going to quit. I don't know, but I called him twice at like 2 a.m. Right. And I remember, like, when I got off the phone to him, I wrote it off as a pocket dial because I didn't want to deal with it. But then I'm frantically going through my phone, like, how long was this call? Did I leave a message? What have I done? Thankfully, they were only 2-second calls, so there was no damage. But then you look at the bank account and I've spent like $600. And I was like, well, that would have been the leather skirt that I wanted. And it's ridiculous that a leather skirt made me think about this, but I was like, wouldn't it have been better to have the skirt instead of waking up and feeling like a complete dickhead, I pissed money up against a wall. Like, what have I got to show for it?
Yeah.
And this has essentially been my life for the last 15 years. I've been doing this, and that's why you don't have money in the bank, and that's why you're freaking out about how you're going to pay the rent, and your sister's upset at you, and you've upset your boyfriend and potentially your boss. And I just remember sitting on the couch and just crying and crying and crying. And it was just that was my rock bottom that day.
Yep.
And I think everybody who is going to make a significant change in their life has to hit that point, because family and friends that I'd grown up with had constantly been questioning the way I was drinking, and I kept writing it off as, it's just hospitality, this is what we do. And
convenient as well, of all industries, right? To be able to pass it off as that.
Yeah,
yep.
Which is wild. But my hospitality friends would be like, it's fine, you're fine, we need to let off steam. And they would just keep, I'm not blaming them, like, my actions are my own, but it's crazy how we all say, it was a really hard service, it's fine, go and drink 27 Negronis, it's all good. So
we make it okay.
We do.
Yeah. And the environment, the people can help or hinder, but
I think we listen to what we want to hear, right?
Oh, they are some very wise words, Jack.
Yeah.
We listen to what we want to hear. It's so true.
I did it for a really long time. So I called my mum and my dad and my sister, and I just said, I'm going to give up drinking. And that was met with some serious relief. And it's been a lot of processing for me, I guess, over the last 3 years of how much hurt I've caused them worrying about me. Like, my dad, I remember I passed out on the steps of Town Hall Station once, and somebody's found my phone next to me and called my dad and been like, your kid's unconscious in the middle of the city. And imagine a parent hearing that, and dad's like jumped in the car, got speeding fines on the way into the city to come and get me. Can you imagine, like, being a parent? I think about it, and I think about having kids and my kids going out and doing that based on what I know that I got up to, and it is scary. It's so scary, and there's a lot of guilt, I guess, in me about the hell I put my family through, thinking and worrying about what I was up to and whether or not I was going to make it home alive, because I think back and I don't know how I didn't get murdered or raped or step out in front of a bus. Like, I'm so thankful that I dodged all those bullets, because I don't know how I did with the way that I was drinking. And I stopped. I just stopped cold turkey. And a lot of people, I had one friend who didn't see me for 6 months, which was really disappointing, but overall everyone else in my circle is still there. The ones that, I made the effort to change the way that we were interacting were the friends that I realised were true friends, because there were relationships in my life that were based solely on Party Jacqui, and when that got stripped away, there wasn't a lot left in common. Don't get me, I still like going out. I still like going to bars and pubs and stuff like that. I don't walk into them and think, my God, I need to have a drink. I'm lucky in that I've made that separation, and I'm still happy to go out. But I had a little, it was June, and then I went up to Byron in January the following year, and so many people were saying to me, when are you going to start drinking again? Are you going to start drinking
Interesting,
again?
preempting that there will be a time that you will.
Surely it's just a little break, which was weird, because why do so many people care?
Right.
But I started feeding into that bullshit, and I had a drink, and it was at one of my favourite restaurant up there, and I was like, I'm going to have a little cider, and I had 2 glasses of cider, and I called it at that night. And then the next day we went out for dinner, and with a friend who lived up there and I hadn't seen in a little while, and I don't think she knew that I'd stopped drinking, and so she just poured the wine, and I didn't stop her, and I ended up having, I think, 3 glasses that night. And my best mate who I was up there with was like, what do you want to do now? And I was like, let's go to the pub. And he was like, you sure about that? And I was ready to nosedive straight off. And I was like, yep, let's go. And we got to the pub, and we were waiting in line to get a drink. I was going to get a beer, and I just started looking around at all the people, and they were all wasted. and it was gross. And I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you really ready to ruin all this hard work? And I looked at Zach and I was like, I need to get out of here. We have to go. And he was like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm okay, but I got to go. I can't be here anymore. And we walked out of there and I haven't had a drink since. And I woke up the next morning feeling dusty. Mm-hmm. And I'd only had 3 glasses of wine. It wasn't like I, really hit it, but I felt the effect of it. And I was up in Byron and the weather was shining and I wanted to go scuba diving and I felt not my greatest. And I was like, why have I been doing this to myself for so many years and giving up beautiful days and opportunities to make plans with people because of a hangover? And you wouldn't willingly go and give yourself a cold, right? Or get cancer or any other illness. You just would never willingly put yourself in a position to get sick or be sick. But I was doing it to myself every weekend. I would make plans around being hungover. I wouldn't make plans on Monday because I knew I would be hungover. Sunday night's my night. Monday is a free day. And I would sit in bed for 12 hours straight hugging a toilet bowl. Why? I think about all the life that I wasted feeling like shit. And it's upsetting, but it's also nice to know that I've made the decision to stop. And that was something that I really struggled with. And it wasn't until my psychologist said to me, stop living in that I wish I had have stopped sooner mentality and live in the, hey, I'm glad I figured it out now instead of in 10 years' time, because you've got that time now. So that was a really big one for me because I lived a lot in what have I done with my life? I've just wasted it. And that's a sad space to be in instead of looking at the positives of the changes that you've made
and significant changes.
Yeah.
Your hindsight is 20/20 and we can all be great.
Yeah.
We're not, we're human.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is going to resonate with a lot of people because whether it's one drink too many or someone just doesn't want to drink at all, we know this particularly in Australian culture. We're really pro encouraging that each other has a drink or another drink. And I've noticed a big shift. Obviously, we're seeing the acceleration of sales happen with non-alcoholic beverages. They're covered in more categories and more retailers than ever before. But I notice even with friends, the conversation is more around, even without excessive drinking, there's a feeling, and maybe it's because we're getting older, but it can bring on anxieties or feelings of not being oneself.
Yeah.
The next day that we're just not willing to compromise or to experience because of what we have to compromise to have that.
Yeah.
And maybe it used to be that it could be a bottle and now it can be, 2 drinks. But there's definitely this kind of more normalized conversation around a choice not to drink.
Yeah.
Why it has taken us so long. And it is it's hard to fathom and we've got a long way to go. And I'm saying this understanding that addiction is very different to social drinking, but at what cost we put this pressure on ourselves and compared to other some countries don't experience this at all.
Yeah. It's a very Australian thing.
Yeah.
Really, it's really, really Australian to drink the way that we do. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
I can't, I know we have this big pub culture, but when did we get to a point where binge drinking is so prevalent? Walking around the city last weekend, I had to stop. We found a girl passed out on the street and it was me on town hall steps, right? Her shoes were off, her phone was over there. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And my friend, being aware of, not frightening this poor woman who's passed out was just, hello, can we help you? Can we put you in a cab? Can we take you close? Can we walk you home or something like that? But it was just why do we, this isn't normal to see this level of drinking. It's scary. It's really, I don't know how we got here. I don't know how it's so accepted, but there is such a huge culture of drink. And I never realized it until I stopped. And it's everyone else's concern. And not mine. Like it just, the amount of people that were like, are you pregnant? Are you, what's wrong with you? Why are you not drinking? Are you on medication? I'm like, no, I just
and did I need a why?
Yeah.
And is it anyone else's business? Given that, as I said, people will be experiencing this in their own way, is there anything that has worked really well for you to be able to stay on the path that you're on? Or was there even some language that you did start to use that you felt gave you that buffer, that you weren't always explaining yourself?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big pressure that a lot of us feel is, all right, well, I'm going to have to answer to someone, even though that's outrageous.
Yeah,
we know this. Yeah, what would you recommend?
In the beginning, I really struggled with it. Because I guess it was a bit of a shock for people that I wasn't. And when I did stop, the whole non-alcoholic thing was nowhere near as prevalent. So that was a hard one. And I guess I didn't know what the right thing to say was, because it is uncomfortable to admit to people that you don't know that maybe you had a problem with alcohol. So in the early stages, I just I guess I spent time with people that knew my real story and understood why I was doing it. And I just sort of gradually waited until I was more confident to put myself into broader social circles where I might end up in a situation where I had to explain it. I guess because I still find it quite confronting when people challenge me on it. But now I'm really confident in my decision, so it doesn't bother me talking about it, whereas before it did. So I guess maybe the advice is not necessarily for the people that aren't drinking, but it's more the people around to have a bit more awareness. And if somebody's saying no, whether it be for whatever reason it is, don't ask a question. Offer them a sparkling water or a heaps normal or something else. Like, don't push people for answers, because at the end of the day, if you saw a heroin addict on the street refusing heroin, you wouldn't be like, oh, excuse me, why are you saying no to that for? What's wrong with you? You'd be like, yeah, good job, dude. Good on you. You're on the right path. Why, there could be a million reasons, whether it's addiction or family issues or whatever it is, but just there's no need to delve into that. Like, someone's decision is someone's decision, and just respect that regardless. Yeah. But I've just found that for myself personally, being confident of the reasons why I choose to continue not to is how I tackle it now. When people say to me, why do you not drink? My response is because I'm a better person without it. And I don't need it to be me. And I think in the beginning, I thought I needed alcohol to be engaging or funny, or, one of my first outings or social experiences as a non-drinker was at Kitty and Tim's. And that was the one prior to the one I met you at. But I was freaking out. Like, how am I going to go to this dinner party with a bunch of people that I have no idea who they are and talk to them? I don't know how to do that. And normally, before I would enter into a situation like that, I'd have a couple of gins at home so that I knew how to talk to people in a social setting. And so that was really confronting for me, but I did it, and I had such a great time that every time you do it, you start gaining back that confidence that alcohol essentially strips from you, right? Like, this thing that we take to make us think that we're better at our lives or ourselves or more confident actually strips it away, because you do it so frequently and you become reliant upon it in social situations to think that you can engage, and you lose your social skills. Yeah. You do. You lose the confidence to walk into a room and walk up to somebody that you've never met and say, hey. Right. And that, every time I went out and engaged with people, I got a little bit more confidence back, and it just kind of kept building it up and up and up. And that's a really priceless feeling to have, to know that you can do that.
That's so good to hear. I know something that we've spoken about before on this, and maybe even if there's someone listening who can't relate to it in an alcohol sense, if you've been in a long relationship and you're used to always going out with a partner and then all of a sudden you're single, there can be that relearning of what it's like to be independent. Can I talk to someone? What is this going to be like? And I think, adult friendships, and thank God there's so much more written about this and more spoken about it, but it is almost relearning the thing that you already know, of course, but it's there is no better feeling than realizing you can do something that you didn't think you can do, as
Absolutely.
simple as it is.
Yeah.
And so I think like there's a real message here, which is just do the uncomfortable and you'll figure your way as you go. Like, you're such a good example of that. Given that you've made decisions that aren't always the easy ones, in fact, sometimes very, very challenging, it's one thing for us to navigate ourselves, but you're turning up as a leader. You're managing a team. There's work that has to be done.
Yeah.
What do you do when you need resilience and you need that thing? But, I mean, recent months, for example, turning up even though the day before has been really challenging.
Yeah.
What's your strategy? What do you do?
Look, I still try and figure it out. For me now, because I never did before, I think about the long game and I think about my career and my retirement plan and all that sort of stuff. Like, I'm a homeowner now, so I think about paying a mortgage and all of that sort of stuff. I'm so responsible these days. But I never thought about 10 or 20 years' time. I always thought about right here and now. So that's a big motivation for me now, to think about what life looks like for me in the future and setting myself up to not have to work when I'm 75 on the pans and things like that. So what I do right now is me thinking about me in 20 years' time. And even if work has been uncomfortable and hard for me in the last 2 months, I'm doing it now and it's small time in order for me to, short term, in order for me to be set up and in a really great position in 12 months' time or 18 months' time. So I think about life. I try to think about life in a broader sense now, and small drop in the ocean versus, I think before, I didn't know how to deal with the stress of the situation. I didn't realize that I felt anxiety until I stopped drinking. I didn't know what that emotion was because I would just get wasted and blow it all away and not, obviously not deal with it. But I guess so much of what I'm trying to do now is expand on my leadership skills. And I'm really conscious of the fact that my mood affects 30 people around me now. It's not just me. And I've not been good at that in the past. Like, I've not always been a great manager. I'm not saying I'm a great, amazing manager now.
Serious self-awareness.
I was a jerk. Like, I was 25, 26, stepping into a kitchen as a female head chef with all this media attention, and the pressure on that is astronomical. Like, you want to make your mark on what what you're doing in your career, and I didn't handle it well. I was a jerk. Like, I'd never personally attack people, but I would be snappy and yell and, I'm not proud of how I've always managed, but, we don't learn that as chefs, right? Like, there's no thing in TAFE when you're apprenticeship that teaches you how to be a manager. You absorb bits and pieces from where you come from, and then you put that in the melting pot of a stressful kitchen with a team of 20 chefs, and you don't know how to manage people, and then the bloody media is on you and wants to take photos of you and review your menu and do all this, and then social media comes into it. It's a lot. And we don't learn how to manage that. It's just time. And we had high staff turnover and all of that stuff, and you've got to be able to self-reflect and figure out what you're doing wrong in order to do it. So I guess in answer to your question, I try and think about how I want to be as a leader and a mentor in the working environment for those around me. So I think that really, I try to use that to shape how I show up the next day and just be really aware of the fact that stress seeps through my pores. Like, I don't hide it well. So my focus, I guess, at the moment, and what I've learned about myself in the last 2 months of, and a horrible situation, was you've got to, as a leader, sometimes you have to learn to just show up for the people around you because they're looking at you and they're looking at you for guidance. And some of these kids might be 17 or 18 and it could be their first job. And it's not about suppressing it, and it's not about making your own life harder, but it's just about trying to be the leader that I want to be. And I guess that's what I'm trying to improve upon now, and use that to shape the way that I show up every day for work and all of that. And I guess in that is learning how to work on yourself and how to deal with the other things on the outside to relieve your stress. Like, what is it that I like doing in order to calm me down or, you know, shake it off instead of going out and hitting the drink? What is it that I do? And I think that's such a big picture thing that I never knew. And a lot of people don't know how to answer that. So, yeah, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think will happen in the hospitality industry moving forward, given that there will be more leaders like you? And, I mean, the younger generation are commanding it as well. They're actually making us be better as leaders. What do you think it's going to look like in 10 years' time?
Oh, it's a weird one because I'm from a part of the industry that has worked in the really horrible side of it, but I'm also in the side of it that wants and needs change. It's weird because it's hard, right? Being a manager is really hard, and sometimes you do have to step in and work 120-hour weeks to get the job done, right? If you want to be a business owner, you want to be, you know, a head chef or whatever it is, there's responsibility that comes along with that, and there's got to be an awareness of sometimes there's a little bit of sacrifice involved in getting to those top roles and getting to those positions, because otherwise you never will, or it'll never be a point that you reach without realizing that there is sacrifice. And I love the direction the industry's going. I had a really hard time, 3 years ago after I tried to go back to work since giving up drinking, and I totally had a meltdown. Like, I started having panic attacks and all this, and I didn't know how to deal with the stress. And from that, it was abundantly aware that we were doing the wrong thing with the business and not treating our staff the way that we should have been treating them, myself included. And that pushed a really big shift. So the changes in the industry are amazing, and it is what I hope will bring more talent back to the industry. But part of me also still wants a little bit of that discipline from the old days, and that knowing that you do need to work hard to get the job done sometimes. And if you want to make it to those top roles, and a lot of the time now it's 40 hours I've got to go. I've done my 8 hours for the day. Like, a lot of that mentality of I need to get my job done before I go home doesn't exist anymore in the shift in the labour market. And I think, COVID's had a lot to do with all of that. And it's weird because I love what I'm seeing in one hand, and it's great. And I really want NOMAD Group to be one of these great employers that really respects people's balance and personal space. And I don't want people to work more than 40 hours a week. I want that to be our gold star standard. And we do achieve that across the board in all 3 restaurants, which is really great. But I want a little bit of that discipline back, because I do worry about some of these guys, the top of the tree in 10 years' time, with these people that don't understand what it takes to get to the top, and what happens when, like, if one of your sous chef walks out, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to say, I've clocked my 40, I'm going to go home now. And I guess that, as much as I really want to be optimistic about that, I do have a concern about what that looks like in 10 years' time. But on the other hand, I love what I'm seeing as well. So it's just, I'm hoping that we strike a really good balance between what life is and should be like, because I think we've all learnt that, and that's huge. And I love that for my industry and everybody else's industry, that we do have boundaries now in what we're prepared to give to work, because we've all given too much. A lot of, we all have, and that's not okay. Knowing that there's life beyond work, because I don't want to be on my deathbed at, I'm going to say 95, and just think all I did was cook.
Some really good meals.
Yeah. I hope so.
Design some really good menus.
But I want there to be more. I don't want it to just be that. And so it's a weird one, but it's great. It's so great. I'm going to say I'm like 95% loving the way that everything's going, and there's just a little part of me that's like, I want to see just a bit of that drive and spark in some of the people to, really hone the craft and focus on learning and see the skill in the little jobs. And I think there's a lot of, I don't want to do that job because it doesn't sound prestigious, or it's not the grill, or it's not this great fancy section, but it's like there's skill to learn in everything.
Yeah.
Every little thing, even if you're scrubbing a floor, like scrub the floor and be the best damn floor scrubber there is. Like learn how to do it really well and then progress to the next thing.
We've started to glamorize the most celebrated part of the roles rather than rewarding the nitty-gritty intricacies that actually have someone know their craft.
Yeah.
And as a creative, that's something I'm always reminding myself. Craft is everything, and your ability to execute it and confidently execute it comes down to those little things that maybe in the beginning you didn't really value or want to do.
Yeah.
But there's something in that which I think breeds confidence. And so often the conversation I'm having with our students in the classroom and different people that I mentor is, at what point does confidence kick in? And I think confidence is something we accrue. It's almost like we take a step in an uncomfortable direction, do the thing that we, is out of our comfort zone, and we get rewarded by it, which sounds so simple and obvious. But too often we wait for confidence / celebration or prestige to come before we'll actually do the action and the task, which is so backward.
Yeah.
But I think that's a reflection of just society and where things are at. You mentioned the power of a leather skirt before. What is your absolute go-tos in fashion? You've got a really unique sense of style. I love your style. What are your go-tos, the pieces you can't live without?
I'm a leather gal. Like I've got like 6 different leather skirts. I've got leather pants. I've got leather jackets. I will like wear just black head to toe for 6 months, and then there's colour and
colourful lobster shirts.
I'm weird because, like it'll be so basic, jeans or a denim skirt. There's a lot of denim, there's a lot of black, there's a lot of leather, and then I'll just wear a ridiculous print or a bright colour, and it's just, I'm either one or the other. You can either blend into the crowd, or then the next minute I'll be wearing something completely ridiculous.
That's essentially a rock star wardrobe. Yeah, pretty much denim, leather, and something that kind of packs a punch.
I'll take that.
That is a rock star wardrobe. I hope it's okay that I can say this as your friend. You'll tell me if I can't.
I'm nervous.
If I was listening to this, there is something that is a really valuable takeaway, which is you've just demonstrated in how such a short period of time you can go from really questioning your life and making some pretty amazing decisions, a little bit of money in the bank and a need for change, to being in a position, you said you're a homeowner, you have the most beautiful place.
I love my
your
little home.
styling is on point as well. And you're opening new restaurants and you seem happy above all else. There's this groundedness in you, and it's really lovely to be around. Sometimes we think change can take a really long time. And I think what you've just highlighted is that, there's work to be done, of course, but it doesn't have to take forever to change things up. I mean, it sounds like your life essentially is a 180.
Yeah.
Does that resonate? And if so, what's a reminder or a word of advice you could give to someone that isn't content where they're at the moment?
I guess, when I look back on it, it's been this 3-year journey, right? But it's been a million little things within that 3 years, right? It started with one decision and that was a big change. But within that, there's been so many little ones in between there. And it doesn't need to be, so many people say to me, oh, wow, you stopped drinking. I should give up drinking. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't if you don't want to. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it's not a problem for you and you have a healthy, fine relationship with alcohol, then keep drinking. Like, you don't have to do it on my account or anything like that. But I guess there's just little things in every day that it doesn't need to be a major thing. It could be as simple as saying, I want to start waking up half an hour earlier every day because I think that there's value in getting up earlier and seeing the sunrise or something like that. Or
walking, running. Yeah. I know they're both things that you've...
Yeah, like understanding that exercise is great for my mind and it helps me be a better person. So I'm going to commit to doing that, or I'm going to commit to making a home-cooked meal twice a week instead of Uber eating every night of the week, which we've all been guilty of. It doesn't need to be major and it doesn't need to be instant. It can be so gradual. And, you know, from where I was 3 years ago to where I am now, it's a 360. But it didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't just because of one decision. It was because of a whole pile of tiny little decisions that got spurred on by one big one. But, you know, that a little start is all it takes. And I guess one thing that I try and think to myself a lot now is I try and put myself in an uncomfortable situation every day, even if like a big one, a little one. And that's kind of my life motto. And it might be, and this is so silly, but it was, one of them was learning and teaching myself how to catch trams now that I live in Melbourne. And, you know, like the big one was me buying a house in Melbourne and picking up my entire life and moving down here because, you know what, why not? That was huge. But then getting down here, it's like, oh, and I didn't catch trams for such a long time. It was so ridiculous because I was like, oh, what if I get lost? And, you know, when you step back and think about it, it's like, how lost can you actually get? Do you know what I mean?
It's true.
How silly was it that I avoided catching trams for like 2 months because and one day I was like, you know what, just get on whatever tram turns up, get on it. And it went the wrong way and I didn't. Lost. But we're like, you're never going to get too far away from where you need to go, I don't think. So it's just, I think that is something that I find really valuable for me in prompting the difficult conversation with your own brain, is just put yourself in a situation that is uncomfortable every single day, whether it be big or small, and you will force change in yourself by doing that, just by challenging your brain and thinking about things differently. So I guess that's my life motto at the moment, or has been for the last 3 years, and it's working. So
it is working. It suits you.
Thank you.
It's really, it's inspiring to see.
Thank you.
Doing uncomfortable things one every day. Like saying yes to a friend who says, come on, let's have a conversation we don't usually have. Come and join me on the podcast.
But do you know what, like saying yes to that dinner party with Kitty, look at all that amazing stuff that's opened up, and Chris and Giddy and all the wonderful friends I've met just from saying yes to a situation that I normally would absolutely, even when I was drinking, I probably wouldn't have said yes to doing that because I don't like being in situations with people I don't know. And imagine if I didn't do that, right? Like I wouldn't be sitting here with you. I wouldn't have met your wonderful circle of friends and have a new circle of friends down here to spend time with. And when you reflect back on that, I've never landed in a bad position from saying yes to an opportunity. And I keep being grateful and thankful for all the situations that I put myself in now, because I wouldn't be where I am without doing it. So just got to take a chance.
Got to take a chance. Some seriously wise words. Thank you so much for being so open and honest. There's real guts. Like there is a rock star approach in how real you are about telling your story. Part of that I think comes back to, again, being a woman and having an idea of how people might perceive us.
Yeah.
We moderate, we filter, we give people a version. And the way that you describe the last few years is with so much, it sounds like it's freeing. There's freedom in that realness. So I know I feel inspired to just keep it real.
Thank you.
And as you said, take a chance. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You end up on a tram that takes you in the wrong direction.
I got lost on Lygon Street. How do you even do that? I think that's impossible.
Not. We've learned. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Rule Breaker, Style Maker. If you'd like to keep up to date with new episodes, podcast news, and what we do at ASI, be sure to follow our Instagram at Australian Style Institute. And if you're wanting to follow my own personal style journey and all things human behaviour of style, then you can follow my personal account at Lauren D. Bartolo. And I'll see you in the next episode.